Pixel Project Radio is exclusively supported by listeners like you. If you would like to join the other gracious folks who have decided to kick us a couple of bucks a month, you can head on over to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. You'll be able to view all of our tiers and see all of the bonus content that comes with it and find something that's right for you. That's patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. Thanks. On to the show. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Rick Firestone, and you're listening to Pixel Project Radio, a video game discussions podcast where we talk about all of the video games that we love, and some of them that you love too. And today, there's a dream team in the house. And I'm not even talking about Chrono Trigger. Today, I am joined by two of my best friends in podcasting, two of my favorite podcasting people, and missing two more of my favorite podcasting people. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I am joined today in, I guess, alphabetical order by first name, Dave Jackson of Tales from the Backlog and Ryan Yingling from List Off Podcast. My fellas, my brothers in podcasting, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us on, man. This is great. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, my brother in gaming. Thank you so much for letting me join you. I feel like I'm cheating on Brian by doing a Chrono Trigger episode.
Yes, and when I said I'm missing two of my favorite people, that is Ben, obviously my co-host, Ben Bugale, and Brian of Listoff, which I'm particularly sad about because Chrono Trigger is his favorite game. So, this episode is formally dedicated to Brian of Listoff Podcast. This is for you, buddy. We wish you were here. We know you're doing more important things, though, if there is such a thing as more important than video games. But whatever, it's not my place to judge.
I know he appreciates that for sure, and he will definitely be tuning in.
That's the plan. That's the plan. We got to get him. We got to get our hooks in them. Then they just stay around.
Chrono Trigger is the bait, and that's how we catch Brian.
It would work every time.
Every time.
Every time.
So this is a game that I would venture to say most everybody that plays games is familiar with in one way or the other. And even if you don't play games, honestly, if you saw it, it would strike feelings of familiarity within you. And we'll get to why that might be. But I wanted to talk with you two first up just about your general histories with the game. When did you first play it? When did you first hear about it? You know, have you played it multiple times like a lot of people have? So just going in order of the Discord that I'm looking at right now, Dave, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. So I did not have a Super Nintendo growing up, so I did not grow up with this game. And I just grew up hearing about it from my friend Aaron Engel, co-host on a Top 3 podcast. People, you guys, Aaron, lots of people know him. He loves Chrono Trigger, and we grew up with him just... we'd be talking about video games and he'd be like, but you know what, man, you got to play Chrono Trigger sometime. But I didn't have a Super Nintendo. I didn't know that there was a DS version, even though I had a DS. And so I just never played it. And it went into that realm of games where I was like, I might play this someday, I might not. And I'm going to have to be okay with that. And then I was looking through the App Store on my phone, looking for a game to play on my phone during my lunch breaks. And Chrono Trigger's on iOS. So I bought that, played it for the first time in 2020, I think, and I didn't like it. And I later came to find out that that was because I don't like playing JRPGs on my phone because I'm too distracted to pay attention or internalize anything, really. Every notification that comes down, I have a broken brain where I have to check it. And so get out of the game, check whatever it was, get back in. I don't care about the characters anymore. That was kind of how it went. And then once I had that realization and I got a new 3DS, I played the DS version again, had a much better time with it. But I am a relative newcomer to Chrono Trigger despite hearing about it for literal decades.
Yeah, First of all, I just want to say you don't have a broken brain or anything. That's just the manipulation of notifications on our dopamine system. I'm not going to get into a whole diatribe on that.
No, it's
Thank
true.
you, Rick. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
I turn off notifications. Like, I don't want to see them. I have the same problem. I feel like everybody probably does.
Yeah.
It's a problem, man. Speaking of phones, though, like a buddy of mine has that backbone case that you attach to your iPhone. He streams like PS Now, or I guess it would be PS Plus and stuff like that. I think Stadia he tried for a while. He really likes it. Like he does Fortnite on it all the time.
Yeah, my phone is more powerful than my PC, so that's not a horrible option for me to play a lot of games. And like, I just throwing this out there, if anyone's listening and you are not like me, or if you have an iPad or something that you play games on, the iOS version of Chrono Trigger is really good. I just couldn't focus. So if you're not like me and you can turn off your notifications because you're not desperate for attention, then maybe give that iOS version a shot. It's pretty good.
Well, we're all podcasters here, so we're probably desperate for attention.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm going to have to counter what Dave said and say, don't buy the iOS version because of those notifications. Kind of echo your statement as well. But my personal history with the game was I played it when it first came out. Basically, it might have been like a year later or something like that. There wasn't as big of a push to get games day one. Maybe it was the age that I was, or maybe it was just the time. But I remember seeing my friend playing through Chrono Trigger, and I was a huge fan of Final Fantasy VI-3. You know it's Final Fantasy 3, though. Well, I mean, it's really 6, but it was 3 to... At the time, it was 3 to me. And I saw Chrono Trigger, and immediately it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of like Final Fantasy 3. I want to get this. I want to play it. So I did play it, and I remember really enjoying it. I remember distinctly thinking Final Fantasy 3 was the better game. I'm going to call it 3. I know people are screaming at me, but that's what it was. And I have to say, when we all got together to talk about playing it for the show here, Dave had recommended that iOS version, and I think you even warned me, like, oh, notifications are a bad thing. If you could get past them, it's a good version. And that's how I first started playing. I made it about 45 minutes into the game before I was like, nope, this is too much. I'm getting text messages and Discord notifications, and I couldn't do it. So I went ahead and I played it on an emulator. Dun, dun, dun.
Are those police sirens I hear? Those helicopters?
Yeah, I think so. So because in my memory I played it on the SNES, that is what I chose from my emulator. And I didn't realize till I was about 10 hours into the playthrough that, wait a minute, this emulator also has a 3DS. So I could have played the updated version, but at that point there was no going back. In between that time, I never revisited it. I had many people tell me how great it was and how it was their favorite game of all time, and some people even said it every episode we did. I don't know. I never felt compelled to revisit it, and we'll see if I'm glad that I did.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we have a perspective here of somebody that played it when it was fresher than 2020 or 2022. This is another one. I'm kind of in the same camp as you, Dave, where I was aware of it adjacently for a long time, and I knew it was considered one of the best, and I knew that it had the Dragon Ball guy, and it had the Gooch, it had Sakaguchi, and it had so many big players, and I, for one reason or another, I just never did it, and I think that puts me in a perspective to judge it without nostalgia, because one of the biggest takeaways that I have found on the internet is that, well, in general, people will look at games that they grew up with rose-colored glasses. This game particularly often gets touted as the greatest JRPG of all time, and I do not think that is true. I think it is a very, very, very good game, not the greatest of all time, and we'll get into maybe why, but I played this for the first time in 2022. I played the Steam port, which is, I believe, a port of the 3DS version, which I believe is the same as the iOS version. So they're all kind of the same. The Steam port is regarded as being fine. It's a very good port, which is good for Square for once. I actually played this entirely on my Steam Deck, So that was a really fun treat. Well, not entirely, technically, but mostly. Runs great, even though it's technically not, quote, great on deck. But it was great. Playing it handheld was a game changer, and it just looks good on a small screen because of, pixel art. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. As I said, though, I don't think it's the best, so I wanted you both have different feelings towards JRPGs. I wanted to see where, if you had to rank this, like in terms of your favorite JRPGs of all time, or of the JRPGs that you've played, whereabouts would this fall? Whether you want to use a number scale, an arbitrary scale, a tier list, whereabout this is this for you? For me, this is sitting like solidly towards the top or middle top of the A tier. Like it is very, very good. It's got its faults, it's got its problems, but it does so much so well, and there's a lot to love about it. What about you two? I'm curious about this.
It's up there for me. I think playing through it now only made me hold it in a higher regard when considering the time it came out. I'm going to probably make a lot of comparisons during this episode to Live Alive, because I just recently played through that as well. I actually think I would rank Live Alive higher. I think it has more problems, but I also think it innovates more and does some incredible stuff for the time it came out originally. I actually did a top 5 JRPG episode a while back. Go check that out if you haven't already. And I'd left Chrono Trigger off of it. Now I did so with the intent of knowing Brian would absolutely have it on his list, and I didn't want to talk about games that somebody else was going to bring up with more passion than I would have. But it probably isn't my top 5 JRPGs of all time, and I think it may be because I don't play a lot of JRPGs. It's not a genre I dig deep into, and I think that's why it's held in such high regard. I think it's because if you are a casual game player who also happened to be playing games 25 years ago, there's a good chance you're going to love this game and make it your favorite JRPGs, especially if that's a genre you don't dig into. It's that good. It's deserving of people calling it that. And I'd hate to use the word casual, but for like casual JRPG players like myself, I could see it ranking that high. And that's partially the reason it ranks so high for me. I don't think it's my favorite of all time, but I think it does some incredible things. And I absolutely loved playing through it again. I was surprised. I think I now enjoy it. For the longest time, I think for 20 years, I was saying, Final Fantasy VI is the better game. And I was standing by that. And I don't want to say that anymore. I will say I think Chrono Trigger is the better game than Final Fantasy VI now. And that's not a thing I thought would come out of my mouth, but here we are.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on like your overall assessment there, Ryan. Like this is not going to be in probably my top 3 JRPGs. I kind of agree with Rick. It's like a solid A. Like very good game. It's got a lot of things that like it really has going for it over other JRPGs. Like this game is half the length of a lot of my other favorite JRPGs, and the music in the game is incredible. But for me, a JRPG, 2 things that I really want to like put one over the top is I want to really connect with the story, and I want to be kind of tactically challenged in combat. And neither of those things really happened for me in Chrono Trigger. So it's a really good game. But yeah, I'm kind of with the rest of you guys. Like this is not approaching the top JRPGs for me. Very good game though. There's nothing wrong with a game being in the A tier if we're going to rank it that way.
Yeah, so you say you were never tactically challenged, and I actually just wanted to say I appreciated that. I think a big reason I now hold this higher than Final Fantasy VI is because I didn't have to grind.
Yes.
And that
there's
was
a lot
awesome.
of stuff like that that I'm like, this game gets bonus points for all cutting out a lot of the crap that bogs down a lot of JRPGs, even some that I hold in higher regard like Final Fantasy VI. There is grinding and there's characters that are totally unnecessary and stuff like that in that game.
And I knew that you felt that way, Dave, and I've been thinking about that a lot. And it's interesting to me because this game does cut some of that stuff that is not objectively bad, but a lot of people don't have taste for. it also falls into some of the classic pitfalls of JRPGs, like some of the most cliche things that, in my opinion, drag it down a little bit. It's just such an interesting amalgamation. I kind of agree with what you said, Ryan. I wouldn't call it, like, I wouldn't use the word casual, but as I was going through this, I kept thinking about who is this for, and it's obviously for everybody and anybody that's a fan of JRPGs, but this would be an excellent first-timer JRPG for somebody that's never been involved in the genre, because it is tight, it's focused, it's short. The characters are all very likable, if not a bit one note, which we'll get to. And it does so much so well that I think first timers aren't going to notice a lot of the nitpicks that we might have with it.
Yep. I recorded an episode for my show, Tales from the Backlog, about Chrono Trigger, and that was one of the big takeaways that me and my guest, Josh, both had, is that this is a great first JRPG for a lot of reasons, like we've kind of laid out here. And also the fact that, like, recommending a game to somebody, especially to a working adult who maybe has a family and stuff like that, it's really hard for me to say, like, Persona 5 is really fucking good, but it's 120 hours. And most people are like, I can't do that. So saying that Chrono Trigger is like 20 to 25 hours is suddenly like way, way more enticing.
I will never go through another game at the pace I went through Persona 5 Royal again. I will never do it. I don't even want to...
That was like a drug.
I don't even want to say how fast I beat that game.
And I will never go through Persona 5 because of what Dave just said.
Exactly.
No, and to clarify, I say casual. I am very much a casual JRPG player. Like, I had a taste for it 20 years ago. I just don't now. And it is that time constraint that weighs heavy for me. I totally agree. And it's a lot of the reasons I appreciated it. I have a family. I don't have a lot of free time. And yeah, you don't have to, it's not that time sink like a Persona 5 or like some of the other JRPGs that you get nowadays. And it did give it a lot of bonus points. If it was me as a kid playing, 20 years ago, might be a different story as far as where it ranks. But I definitely appreciated those aspects of it this go round.
So let's get into a little bit of when and where and how and why this game came about. Is that all of them? Yeah, it's enough of them. Let's get into sort of the origins of this game. Yeah,
who this game came about.
This game?
Who is Chrono Trigger? Why is Chrono Trigger? We're getting existential with the help of Ted Woolsey and the Gooch. So this game was obviously developed by Square. This was before the Square and Enix merger, which is a big deal. This is classic Square. It was originally for the SNES and Super Famicom. It was first released in March of 1995. I was alive then. This isn't after I was born. It has since had multiple ports. As we said, we've played it on different things. Dave played it on iOS. I played it on Steam. Ryan played it on... You tried it on iOS. Did you say that you did it on 3DS, Ryan?
Oh, no, I played the SNES version
on an emulator. That's right. The different ports do have some differences. They are largely the same experience. We'll talk about what makes them different. It comes down to some of the localization, as well as some bonus content and difficulty scaling things. We'll get to that. But this game is very famous for being created and conceived by the, quote, Dream Team. That is Hironobu Sakaguchi of Final Fantasy fame, Yuji Horii of Dragon Quest fame, and Akira Toriyama, who also worked on Dragon Quest but was the animator for the Dragon Ball series. I kid you not, when I first saw this game, my first thought was, why is Gohan's hair red? Like, I have a great affection for Toriyama's style. I love it. I grew up watching Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. It feels so nostalgic to me. I love it, and I think it looks great, and it works here really well too. Not just in the sprite form, which they actually designed all of the sprites based on Toriyama's sketches. And when you go back and look at the official concept art of these sketches, they look so good. Like some of the characters, like the characters that we meet called the gurus in the game, The sprites look good, but it just doesn't do them justice. Those renderings by Toriyama look so crisp and so distinctively early 90s. It's delicious.
Yeah, Ozzy looks like he's straight out of Dragon Ball. Like 100%.
I mean, not even just to mention what Chrono looks like. Chrono
Right,
looks,
of course.
yeah, like we said, Gohan with red hair.
And then obviously Luca is kind of like the stand-in for Bulma. Looks exactly like her. IMO.
Yeah.
So this was conceived by all three of them when they were sort of abroad in America, and they wanted to make a game that nobody had done before. So this is sort of the classic, like, shooting for the stars, breaking all ambition kind of thing. They ended up getting together a dev team of like 50 to 60 people, half of whom had worked on Final Fantasy VI. So they're really getting set up for something special here. Something that I found very funny, and maybe I didn't do enough research into trying to figure out what went on here, but I found that a, quote, uncredited employee is the one who suggested the time travel mechanic, which was shot down at first by the scenario writer Masato Kato because of the idea of repetitive gameplay. I didn't find that uncredited employee's name, but that is very funny to me.
Could you imagine being that guy right now? I swear, I'm the one who came up with time travel in Chrono Trigger. Okay.
Yeah,
buddy.
he's like a janitor who's just offhand, sweeping up in the back, and he's like, you know what you guys should try? It's time travel. And it's like, get out of here. Time travel, you say?
This sounds like an episode of Seinfeld or The Simpsons.
It definitely sounds Simpsons for sure.
Or like Kramer would kick the door in and he'd be like, you took my idea, Jerry. And he would be holding up a cartridge of
my
Chrono
idea.
Trigger.
Right.
What do you mean your idea?
Gonna go down to the office right now.
We're living in a society.
Something else that's very interesting about this is it was going to be on the maybe infamous, you could say, Nintendo PlayStation, the original disc drive Nintendo console. And obviously Nintendo canceled that deal. So in one fell swoop, they not only gave us sort of the best series of consoles, they also gave us and cemented what would be one of the best JRPGs ever. Incredible. Thanks, Nintendo.
Yeah. I like how there's this narrative that like, oh, Nintendo must be really upset that they did this and PlayStation succeeded. But like Nintendo plays its own game separate from consoles. I think they're all right.
Yeah, they did fine.
I don't want to detract too much from the topic here.
So in terms of reception, obviously this sold incredibly well and it reviewed incredibly well. I don't think that's a shocker to anybody. It very frequently shows up on the best of all time JRPGs list. It's an incredibly beloved and incredibly talked about game. It did get a sequel in the form of Chrono Cross, which I haven't played yet. I'm looking forward to it, but I haven't got around to it yet.
Yeah, I never played that either.
Nope. You can probably bet I did not play it.
So let's move into sort of what you get whenever you boot up a game of Chrono Trigger. So obviously the first thing you're going to see are the visuals. I love these visuals. They remind me actually a lot, maybe unsurprisingly, of Final Fantasy VI or 3. If you are
No, I call it 6.
And
I was taking myself back to the 90s.
He just needed to make a point earlier, and now he's going to join the rest of us in calling it Final Fantasy
I was
VI.
speaking as though it were the mid 90s.
Yeah. You're on thin ice, pal. It's so it looks it's pixel art obviously because it came out on the Super Nintendo. But the animations and the movements of the sprites are also exaggerated. It's not dissimilar at all to like stage makeup in theater, where if you've ever seen somebody performing in a musical, for example, or a play up close, the makeup is shocking and horrendous. Yeah. But it's to create the effect of being able to see it from the back row. And it's very much the same here. Everything is very animated. When you win, people are doing poses that are just over the top. You have these moments of great comedy when people are suspended in midair or like screaming. And it's just a very, very good looking game. It's colorful. The sprite work is great. The artwork is great. The anime scenes, if you're playing a port that's not the SNES, is also great. They're straight up Dragon Ball scenes. Like, straight up. There's no way around it.
Uh-huh. The animations were something I really noticed too. They give the characters like so much more life than a lot of other notable pixel art JRPGs of the time. Like Frog in particular, like his animations, it's an anthropomorphic frog, but he's not just walking like a person as a frog. He hops around and he's got this like throat pouch that that bulges when he's like breathing and stuff. And it just gives it like so much more character. And a lot of the other characters do too. Like they have their own specific animations for the way they move and the way they celebrate and stuff like that. It's really like, that was one of the first things I noticed too. Like, especially Frog. I mean, I just got to keep giving credit to Frog. He's my dude. He's like the best character. He's like, I just love Frog.
I'm glad the animation got brought up because it is very exaggerated. Lots of like sweat flying off of heads too, and like eyes getting larger. And it's like, as you mentioned, it's 16-bit, so it's almost necessary. Otherwise, you don't. It wouldn't convey what it's able to because of those animations.
Ryan, did you see those anime style cutscenes because you played the SNES
100%
version?
meant to look at them before this, and I did not. But now it gives me something to do after this. I mean, I've seen what they look like, but I have not sat down and watched them all play out, which I do want to do after playing through the SNES version. But I will say, like, those animations you mentioned play into that 16-bit version of a cutscene. They have really good ways of storytelling as far as animation and movement goes. It felt like one of the more elaborate cutscene that you would have gotten from that era. I mean, when you're watching some of these big moments play out, I didn't feel like I was missing anything, although, of course, seeing it play out with, Dragon Ball Z animation would have been special, for sure.
They're really good. And like, Rick, I wonder if you noticed this too, because in the iOS and the DS version, it has those anime cutscenes. So you'll watch that beautiful like Dragon Ball style cutscene, and then it plays the pixel art version of that cutscene right after it. So you watch both versions whenever those scenes come up, which was kind of weird, but I did see like those pixel art animated cutscenes too, and I agree, those are fine. Like, they're more than enough to tell the story of what was going on in those scenes.
Yeah, it's just it's a nice special treat for the updated version. It's, I mean, it's what is it, like $10, $15, $20? I'm not sure. Any of those, I think, for the animations alone, and for the stress-free way of playing it, fingers crossed on modern systems. I think that's worth the cost of entry. The one scene that I would say I'm glad was in there and is not objectively as good as the anime cutscene, or as the pixel cutscenes, excuse me, is the frog scene where he is cutting the boulder. That's maybe the only one that's just, it's not nearly as good without the anime scene.
I could see that. Yeah, you don't really get to see his face when he's doing it. It just looks like he jumps up and the boulder breaks. The mountain breaks, right?
Yep.
I would like to see Dalton's movements in anime form too. He has some awesome poses.
I don't think that he is in any of the cutscenes now that I'm thinking about it.
Bummer.
But we've been throwing around a couple names. Before we get into the music and the battle system, let's talk about some of these characters. So you play as the titular silent protagonist Chrono, peevingly spelled with 5 letters to me. I notice it every time.
Spelled differently than the name of the game. I definitely was like, they must have just run out of characters or something.
And that's it. It's a 5-character limit just across the board. It's just one of those things. I notice it every time. I'm like, it's weird. Anywho's, but you play as Chrono, the red-haired Gohan, and as far as I can think, I don't really think there are any characters in this game that I objectively think are bad or that I don't like. No, I'm lying. There's one, but let's talk about the main characters first. So who is your favorite main character in the cast, you two?
Ooh, I'll let Dave go first because he kind of already alluded to it.
Oh, yeah, I got real animated there for a second. Frog is my boy. He's one of my favorite characters. He's my favorite character in the game, and he's one of my favorite JRPG characters of this era. Like, Frog's storyline is more complete than a lot of the other characters in this game, and Frog himself, like the way that he handles what's going on and the choices that he's presented with and stuff like that is really good. And like I said, those animations lend so much life to the character that could have been a big miss if they didn't like treat it that way. So yeah, Frog by far.
I definitely agree. I think Frog is the right answer, but I'm going to say Isla, actually. I think she's a great character. I do. I know a lot of people have an issue with like the feral character role. I think it plays less of a role in this because she actually is from the past. But yeah, I'm a big simp for her. I think a reason I appreciated her as well is because I liked her play style. I like the brute force, and in a lot of the battles, I tend to brute force things. And all simping jokes aside, she had some of the best combo attacks in the game. So I always liked having her in my party, especially when mixing her with like someone else's elemental attack. It was clutch in almost every major battle.
I really dislike Isla for exactly the reasons you said that lots of people dislike. I hated every time she was on screen. She's not as bad as Gao in FF6, but I really, really did not enjoy her at all. She's really good in battle. You're right about that. Mm-hmm. So I gritted my teeth and put her in the party sometimes. But whenever she's talking, I was like, oh, I can't do this. This sucks.
Is it just the way that she speaks?
It's like Ryan said, I don't like the feral caveman type character. I hate it as a character trope. Mm-hmm. And I agree that she's not as bad as it could be, because I mentioned Gao before. He's the worst. But yeah, I just really didn't like this. Didn't like her.
I'm a fan of Gao too. Just saying.
God damn it, Ryan.
I can't agree with you there, Ryan.
Yeah, it takes a lot to get Gao good.
At least, yeah, I was going to say, at least she's not a blue mage. At least she can just handle herself in battle.
Right. She's good from the moment you have her in your party. And the moment you get her in your party, she is far and away the strongest character in your party, like immediately. Yep. And so she carried me through a lot of fights. And I think that's a huge reason why. I mean, like I said, Frog is the correct answer. My favorite character in the game is Frog. But,
check.
Isla would be up there for sure.
Isla also has one of the best abilities in the game in the form of Charm, which can get you a lot of really great items from enemies.
I just want to give a shout out to the other female characters in the game, Luca, and I said Marl. How do you guys say her name? Marl? Marley?
No, it's Marl. I say Marl.
Yeah, I say Marl. This falls into the jurisdiction of we say it how we say it and we don't correct each other.
So I just wanted to give them both shout outs for being female characters who can handle themselves, that are not at the whims of or at the mercy of whatever the men are doing, which in some Japanese games, that's how some of the women end up being. But in this game, they're not. They're both badass. They don't take shit from people, especially like Luca's a really cool inventor. Mm-hmm. And then Marl is, she's a princess, but she's not like a helpless princess that's just there to be saved. She can handle herself and she sticks up for herself. So I dig both of them.
I would say Isla also shirks that stereotype. Like I felt like she commands. She basically dictates what they do for like a pretty large chunk of the story.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, so all three of them.
If memory serves correctly, that's a similar situation in Final Fantasy VI. So I think it might be a testament to this whole team, or this former team at Square. I'm with you. Frog is objectively the best character in the game. He's the only character with any kind of characterization and depth of personality, at least in the main game. You get a little bit of characterization for the rest of the characters throughout, but for the most part, none of these characters are deep characters. They're not round. They're very flat characters. They're the same as when they started, as when they end, right? Frog being one of the exceptions. Maybe you could argue Luca being the other, who is also one of my favorites. I had Luca in my party as often as I feasibly could, even though Frog is generally one of the best ones to have, and if you really need 2 healers, Robo's good, or Redacted towards the end of the game becomes a good party member.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So is it fair to say then that, I mean, I really dislike Isla, but she has something to her. Chrono is my least favorite, character as a character, because he is nothing.
He's a good boy.
There's nothing to. He's just a dude with a sword who is trying to help. That's it.
That characterization is going to come up at a scene that is supposed to make you feel things.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good boy. That's what Chrono is. He's a good boy.
He's a good boy, and there's nothing else. He's a dog that can carry a sword.
He is objectively the best party member, though, I think, towards the end of the game.
Yeah, 100%.
Chrono is actually a good example for me of why I don't like silent protagonists. I don't think he adds anything to the story. I think it would have been a more entertaining story had Chrono had a personality. Mm-hmm. I've just never encountered a silent protagonist that I thought, yes, this is the way. I dislike it. And if you want to hear more about that, I believe Ryan has an episode on Listoff about that very topic.
Yeah, the top 5 silent protagonists, yep.
There are definitely many silent protagonists who do a whole lot more to characterize themselves than Chrono, for sure.
Yeah, you can, I mean, we can think of other silent protagonists where you're choosing, their actions or choosing what they quote unquote say, but Chrono you don't do that with Chrono. He doesn't say anything ever. He doesn't communicate. It's just very weird to have a story told around the main character and not involve them. I don't know.
It's kind of a product of the time, right? It was a design philosophy where it was supposed to be you. It was supposed to be your way of putting yourself into the story, right? I think Shigeru Miyamoto had the idea with Link, hey, he's not supposed to say anything because it's like your entry into the world. But I agree. I think it's lacking for sure.
You could take one look at those anime cutscenes and see what Chrono looks like and what he's doing, and I'd be like, that's not me. I couldn't do any of that stuff.
But it should be Chrono too. Somehow he's a great swordsman. He even gets applauded for it, and it's he just rolled out of bed. How's he a great swordsman?
Yeah.
Chrono's out there slaying monsters, and I'm sitting on my couch with a can of Pringles being like, he's just like me, for real, for real.
No cap.
So since we talked about these characters, let's seamlessly transition into sort of how the battle system works and how the movement of things work in the game. Moving outside of battle is your standard JRPG fare. You're sort of on an overmap. You're on a 2D environment, walking around with free range of motion, talking to people, opening chests, things like that. And eventually you get an airship. So there's nothing too crazy there. The battle system is where things get kind of interesting. And the first thing that new players will notice, even if you grew up playing Pokemon and don't consider yourself a JRPG fan, is that there's no random battles.
Jesus Christ, did I appreciate this.
And in a different way that some other games do this no random battles thing. Earthbound doesn't have random battles, but a lot of times in Earthbound, if you see an enemy on the screen, it will catch you. You can't run faster than them. In Chrono Trigger, you can often sidestep enemies or just take a different route if one is presented to you. And so there's a lot of times when you're backtracking in this game and you don't have that dread that I get sometimes when I play Final Fantasy VI, and I'm just I'm going to get 25 random battles just trying to go back to this place. And it doesn't happen in this game.
Yeah, the way that you can skirt around these battles is just by walking past them. The nice thing is that the enemies can touch your party members who always trail behind you, and that's fine. You're not going to get into a battle if they bump into Frog or bump into Isla, only if they bump into Chrono, which is nice. You don't want to avoid too many, because although you don't really need to grind in this game, I think you might need to grind in one spot, in my opinion, but that's about it. If you skip too many battles, you will be underprepared. That is one nice thing. The game kind of lays that pacing out for you pretty nicely. There are random scripted battles, though, so you'll frequently be walking and be ambushed by some enemies that come out of the trees or jump out of the woodwork or whatever. These annoyed me to no end. They really bothered me being in an environment where I could otherwise control my battles. Every time a scripted one happened, I was like, God damn it. Like, not right now.
Yeah, there were a few that you just kept getting over and over and over. I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about, where like, okay, like here's these guys again because I just went back to this era and I have to do this every time. And it did wear a little thin for sure.
And there are some places too where like it's not like one of those scripted ones like Rick said, but the area that you're in is set up in a way where you can't sidestep the enemy there. You're going to have to fight them. And what got me during these sections is like there's some parts where you can like fall down or like slide back to the beginning, and then you have to go back, fight the same enemies again. And now we're in JRPG territory that starts to wear on people.
I also think it's a big reason why I didn't have to grind. And like in my mind, that's how I was justifying it. Like, oh, okay. Like, yes, this is tedious, but it's going to help me later with having an easier time in battles. And it helped a little bit, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, it could have been better for sure.
I will actually go on record and say I don't mind random encounters. I don't hate them. It may be just because I was the generation like you, Dave, that grew up with Pokemon Red and then Gold and then everything else that came after. Mm-hmm. So I don't hate them. I don't think I prefer them. So it's nice playing a game like this or Persona or Earthbound where they're not a thing. New Personas anyway. But another thing that this game does that's interesting, that's a little different from the rest, is that the enemies will be walking around on the 2D environment. You bump into them, and you're immediately in battle. There's no loading screen. There's no battle, like, start animation. There's no sprite change. It's just what you see is what you get. And this was, quote, extremely difficult, as said by the battle programmer, Katsuhisa Higuchi. He said that this was extremely difficult to transition seamlessly without, like, a loading screen from, the non-battle to the battle. I think this was likely possible due to it staying on a cartridge rather than a CD to keep load times down, if I had to guess. But the result is terrific.
Agreed. I love this so much.
Yeah, I actually remember liking Final Fantasy VI better when I was younger because of the battle scenes. And now, I know, but I thought it was like, oh, look how cool, you get this different battle screen and the background's changed based off of environment. And looking back, I was a dumb kid because this is so much better. It really is. It's just, seamless. It's seamless.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but like the relative positioning, does the relative positioning like take into account where the enemies are, or do you bump into them and then everyone takes the formation that's like set for that battle?
Yeah, you take the formation that was on the SNES version. You do anyway.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, that brings us into, well, hold on. So like the battle transitions, I will always have a soft spot for transitions. Like speaking of Pokemon, it is iconic to be walking around and the screen flashes. And you hear that chromatic with the screen winding down. I love that. I think that's so cool. I like it when it's done in Final Fantasy, when it's done in Persona. I really do think it's neat. It was nice to not have it, though, because that meant no load times, and that meant battles go by quicker.
Yep.
And in a game that prides itself on being streamlined and no, cutting the wheat from the chaff, and et cetera, this is great. It's a boon to the pacing, is what I meant to say.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm with you, like, I don't hate random battles, and I don't hate battle transition screens either. Like my favorite JRPG is Final Fantasy X, and that is chock full of those things. But it like you said, when it's not there, it's not like I'm like, I really wish this had it. I was like, oh, this is cool. Jump straight into the battle.
So your Pokemon for my generation, for my era, was the first Final Fantasy, and I played. I honestly, for decades, I played that game once a year, and I know what you mean. I have such a soft spot for the sound effects and jumping into battle and all of that. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't like outright hate random encounters. It's just about how frequently they occur. There is a balance there, and that balance, getting it right, is so necessary when it comes to my enjoyment of the RPG being played.
That's fair. That's fair.
If it happens too often, I'm probably going to turn it off and not go back to it.
Xenogears had an interesting approach to this in that some of the more difficult dungeons that involved platforming would have scripted battles that occur when you step on a certain tile, like a movement tile. It was one that you couldn't see, it wasn't actual tiles, but like a programming tile. And then once you cleared it, if you fell and had to go back, it wasn't there anymore. In a section, I should say, that otherwise wouldn't have random encounters. So that was really nice. There are some games that have done it, better, some worse, but yeah, I'm with you. It is a lot, especially, it's random with each tile or each step. It's like a point whatever % chance, or maybe not. That's maybe too low, but you know what I mean. And, random spares no man. Random is not Absolutely. A kind mistress, and you could get 3 battles in a row, just one step. We've all been there. But,
yeah.
One thing that we alluded to, I think it was you, Dave, is the positioning in battle. And that plays a role in Chrono Trigger in a way that I find perplexing, because your positioning in battle matters. It can net you more hits if you're using an AoE attack. And it can also, mean that you dodge AoE attacks from enemies sometimes. But you can't control them. It turns into a lot of waiting for enemies to maybe come to where you need them to be. And it never came off as strategy to me so much as it did it felt to me like they were handing me something and saying, here, this is different. Different is good. And I'm like, okay, different is good. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yep.
I don't dislike it. I don't, but I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. That was kind of my thing with it too, is that positioning is very important for some of especially early in the game, when some of your best attacks are AoEs, but you can't control anything about the formation. It's just some battles you can use them and sometimes you can't. And then later in the game, your best attacks are no longer AoEs. They're things that hit everything. So it doesn't matter at all. And sometimes your party can get hit with AoE stuff, but you can't control where they are either. So yeah, it's like, oh neat, I can use this spinning move that hits AoE and it's going to hit more than one thing. That's cool. I'll do that this time. But the rest of the time you're like, is it even worth it to use that move? Because I can't set up some big AoE finishing move or something like that. So yeah, I'm with you. It's just kind of cool and kind of a bummer.
So I actually have a question. At the beginning of the game, it presents you with an option for how you want to play combat, right?
That's true.
It does that in the remake as well, or not the remake, but the remaster, DS version, whatever you want to call it. So what did you choose as far as how the fights would play out? I think the options are true turn-based, right? Or like an ATB.
It's called wait and active or something like that. Right.
Yeah, so that is different than movement. That deals with how... so the ATB, the active time battle system, is a Square invention. Mm-hmm. Some on this podcast might call it the best version of turn-based combat. But it involves your character's action bars filling up. You can see this in Chrono Trigger based on their speed stats. They might fill up faster, but you can only go once they fill up. Now, if you want to, you can switch that to wait, which means that if you're trying to decide what you want to do, an enemy cannot take their turn after their bar fills up, right? Then it becomes a game of who gets there first, and then it turns into Final Fantasy X, but hidden. You can't see it, and everybody goes in order. I always go ATB if I can, just because I don't dislike Final Fantasy X's combat at all, but I like that added pressure of having to think on my toes, and I can't dawdle, because then they're gonna get 2 hits on me and I'm gonna die, and then I'm gonna have to spend 3 turns getting everybody back up to health. Mm-hmm. I kind of like it. Yep. What do you think?
I went with ATB. I just real quick, the reason I had asked is because I wasn't sure if any of you had chose wait, if you could actually wait to get off an AoE attack, if the characters moved. If you chose wait.
That's a good question.
Yeah, but if we all chose ATB.
I played on wait when I was playing on the iOS version, because I was playing on a touchscreen, and touchscreen controls are a lot better than they used to be, but they're still not perfect, especially when you got big grubby sausage fingers. So when I played on the iOS version, I played on weight. I quit playing that for several reasons. And then when I played with actual buttons and a D-pad and stuff on the DS, I played on the ATB system. I think the ATB system's way better. Like, this game is not that hard. So like, I don't feel like I really benefited that much from having it on weight. It was literally just like the difference between physical buttons and a touch screen and making a bunch of errors that come with playing games on touch screens. So yeah, but I did try the weight system. It didn't really make the game easier. And I don't remember if enemies freeze when they're not attacking.
I did ATB as well and had a great time with it. But yeah, I ran into the same issue. It was early in the game. Those little like imp goblins like just grouped together. I really want to cyclone you. And, I got tired of waiting.
Just to move us forward a little bit, looking at the time and realizing we've got quite a bit to go, we've kind of encapsulated the rest of the battle system. You can attack, you can use items. The techs we've kind of mentioned offhand. Every character has unique abilities, could be buffs, debuffs, attack one enemy, attack multiple enemies. Each character also has a unique elemental type. Everybody can use magic, except for Robo. Except for Robo and Ayla. I love the excuse that they give, like, Robo's just a machine. You don't get magic. Poor guy.
And I think they say that Ayla is from a time before magic existed, so she can't learn it because of that.
Yep. But everybody else can. For example, Chrono can do lightning magic, Frog can do water magic, etc. So everybody's got a type. Before we do get into the story, I did want to talk about the music, because that is a big part of what makes this game so special. I thought about taking a piece and like doing an actual analysis of it for this episode, but I just didn't have the time. So a lot of this is going to be like just my thoughts on the music as somebody that knows music but isn't like, I'm not, it's like the equivalent to a lawyer saying like, well, I'm not your lawyer, but here's my legal opinion. Except I'll never make that much money and never be that respected in society.
But are lawyers respected?
Who's more respected in society, podcasters or lawyers?
They made an entire show about a lawyer. It's been pretty popular recently.
I'm cringing on the inside thinking about ABC coming out with the newest like comedy about a podcaster.
Oh, would not be good.
It'd be like starring Tim Allen and let's not even go down that
road.
Nope. So the music was composed by first timer Yasunori Mitsuda, who up until that time was working as a sound designer at Square, so designing things like the sound that a monster might make or the sound that happens when you press start. And he was unable to pay his bills and support his family and pay rent. Like he was living the struggle of 2020 in the early 90s, late 80s. And he went to Square and he was like, look, I can't survive. I'm going to quit if you don't give me a bigger job. And Sakaguchi said, okay, like, why don't you compose Chrono Trigger? Maybe that'll increase your salary. And it's one of those situations where it's like somebody was given an opportunity and just, for a lack of a better phrase, he wrote his fucking heart out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. First time and nailed it.
Yeah. That blew my mind that like you listen. Okay. So a lot of like the individual things we talked about to this point, I've been either like, yeah, this is really good, or like kind of lukewarm on. The soundtrack is incredible. Like I know I said this isn't like in my top 3 JRPG like games in total, but this might be my favorite JRPG soundtrack. Like this is a beautiful soundtrack. And then to like do just the slightest bit of research and find out that this was the first game that he did the soundtrack for. What the fuck? How?
It was pretty incredible. He was frequently cited as, working well into the night, sleeping at his office. At some point, his hard drive crashed in the early 90s, and he lost just like 40 tracks. So he had to go back and redo everything, which is a process and a half. He worked himself to the point of being hospitalized with stomach ulcers. And Uematsu, of obviously a Final Fantasy fame, came in and wrote the last like 10 tracks.
Yeah, it's one of those stories where it's like, I do not want to glorify crunching yourself until you go to the hospital. But like the passion that went into this, and like the result is like, you can't argue with the passion that went into it. You can argue with working yourself till you go to the hospital, but like the amount of heart that went into this is inarguable. It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are going to have so much more to say about the music. I'm not very musically educated. I absolutely love every track on this game. And to hear the story behind it, just to echo Dave, yeah, don't work yourself to death. But you could tell that people gave their all to make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really sweet story where he had to go to the hospital before the game was finished, and wasn't, obviously being in the hospital, wasn't involved in putting it all together, which I learned, by the way, is not always the composer that's doing that. Going through Xenogears history, it's not always the composer that's putting the songs where they go.
Interesting.
But there's a really sweet story where they all got together as a team to watch the ending, and Mitsuda like wept with joy. He was so proud.
Wow.
But this music is like, and again, this is not an academic level approach. This is just me spitballing what I heard. It's interesting because it's both highly melodic but very rhythmic, and features some really interesting uses of percussion. It's not just your standard like your drum set. There's a lot of prominent use of tambourine, of marching snare drum sound, sort of a melodic percussion. It's very rhythmically driven. Not always by percussion either. A lot of the ostinatos that you hear, or the musical accompaniment, will be like strings just kind of tracking chords, will be these really chromatic, noodly little licks. It's very quirky. It's very unique. It has moments, like highly dramatic moments that you might hear in an orchestra, thinking of like Lavos' theme is a great example. But also moments of like early rock and roll, like Johnny Be Good, or and like pop music.
The thing with RPGs of this era too, when they have repeating songs, like the town music, right? I feel like with so many titles, I got to the point where I'm like, okay, like you don't even hear the music anymore, right? Because you've heard it 1,000 times up to that point. I never got that way with Chrono Trigger. I would find myself like grooving to it, nodding my head to it. Even if it was something I had heard, the last 100 times I went into the village, it didn't matter. It just didn't matter.
Yeah. I'm someone who like very frequently gets songs that just pop into my head and they just live there for the rest of the day, And the Overworld song in Chrono Trigger is just, it has an apartment somewhere in my head. It'll be there forever. It's so catchy and great. And like when you said rhythm, like rhythmic emphasis, I'm thinking of like that has a very like distinctive rhythm to it, even though it's not percussion instruments giving that rhythm. The Castle song is another one that instantly popped into my head too, thinking about rhythm and percussion.
Do you have a favorite? Do you two have a favorite? Character theme or just track in general? I definitely do.
Oh, okay. What's your favorite while I think about it?
So there are two that are like far and away, like I just love, and one that I think is interesting. So I love Frog's theme.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like coupled with what's going on in Frog's story, that theme will like bring an emotion inside of me in a way that like I like a lot of the other character themes too, but they don't like move me in the way that Frog's does.
It really feels like they wrote Frog and then got around to everybody else.
Right.
Like his theme is the encapsulation of who he is. Luca's theme I also like quite a bit. I think it's titled Fanfare 1, but it's very reminiscent of her. One that I find interesting is Robo's theme.
Yeah.
Hold up. Can we replay that? Are you guys hearing this?
Yeah, I'm hearing. Yeah.
What are you hearing?
I know this song. Hold on. Let me try a little magic here. This is Never Gonna Give You Up.
Actionably, Never Gonna Give You Up.
like this is actually Rick Astley.
Straight up.
Insane. This is the funniest thing. This is the funniest thing about this game to me.
Is that Mitsuda literally worked himself until he almost died, putting together this beautiful soundtrack. And then also, there is Never Gonna Give You Up, just slightly rearranged as a character theme in the game.
Incredible.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. Like, so when I was working on my episode, I put music in my episodes too, and I usually try to cut it to like 6. And in Chrono Trigger, I was like, how am I going to do this? There are so many good songs. And I want to shout out the song that plays when you first start. It's like the main theme of the game, but when you first start up the game and like the cutscene plays,
the one that
like
sounds like a lullaby,
the big soaring theme.
Oh, I know what you mean.
One.
I think that's just called the Chrono Trigger theme.
I think so, yeah. But like, I often would like start up my DS and then like set it down and look at my phone, broken brain again, and then that song would just be playing as that cutscene is going through, and it's amazing. Like, I love it.
What's interesting to me is like when you start the game and it's like the POV looking at the photograph is you get this music box lullaby, and it's called a couple of different things throughout the game. Interestingly, it's associated with Marl as her theme, which is peculiar to me because of how else it's associated throughout the game and the fact that she's not related to other person. I know I'm being very cryptic. I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but like it's one of those instances where that's where I wonder, like, maybe the composer was not placing the tracks in every single instance. This is another flight track from Xenogears just in this game. I don't know. It's interesting. It's very good though. It's very incredible.
There are so many versions now of people covering these songs, and Frog's theme, when you can't think of the name of the person who did it, but I heard a piano version of it, and oh my gosh, it's incredible. Is it the Overworld theme that is like that plucking, that like do 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 do? Yeah. Oh gosh,
that one.
It's
beautiful.
It's funny because of how often you hear it, but that honestly is one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack.
It's so good. It gives you that like slightly weird, but we're going on an adventure type of feeling.
Yeah.
It's great for an overworld theme, which is, you know, even in games that have overworlds that I really, really love. I can't think of the Final Fantasy VI overworld theme in my head right now, but the one in this game is fantastic.
Yeah, top 3 overworld themes for sure.
Yeah. Book it, Ryan.
All right.
We're coming.
Deal.
Do you guys have anything else that you'd like to say before we get into the story? I think we obviously all recommend this game highly. There's no contest there.
Yeah. It's for as much as like when you put on like the critical hat as we do, we want to say like, oh, this is kind of strange, or, you know, this game is good. It's not the best JRPG ever, et cetera, et cetera. Like, this is still a very easy recommendation, especially like, if you're a JRPG fan and somehow made it this long into your life like I did and didn't play this, absolutely do it. And if you've never played a JRPG, like Rick said earlier, this is an excellent one to start because it just doesn't have a lot of the chaff that JRPGs can bog you down with.
Yeah. Dave, I will say you and Rick and many of our podcasting friends are very good about putting on their critic hat. I always leave mine at home, so I will go with the standard I love this video game. It does stand above many of the other video games I love, though.
What you all don't know is that Ryan is at home.
Yes.
And he is wearing a hat.
What is he not wearing? Well, tune in next week. That's patreon.com.
Yeah, exactly. I debriefed, man.
As is custom.
All right. Now that we're all comfy and Ryan's extra comfy, we are going to step into a little time gate and go through the story of Chrono Trigger. So you start
getting woke.
Oh my god. If only you all could see behind the curtain. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. You start off as Chrono. You're sleeping in your bed, and as sort of a trope, you are being awoken up. You're being woken up by your mom. Because it's the Millennial Fair. And it's the celebration time. It's great. There's a whole ordeal. So you're going to go next door to the fair. You're going to see strong men. You're going to see racing aliens and somebody named G.I. Jogger, which I thought was very funny. By the way, this is a perfect time to get into it. This was localized by Ted Woolsey. He is... he's a legend in the localizing community. He's famous for what have been described as Woolseyisms. Because as somebody, I'm learning a language currently, and as people that speak two languages, the languages don't always line up the same way. I think Romance languages tend to. Like, I've heard that Spanish and Italian are very, very similar. Japanese to English is not at all the same, and ideas are expressed very differently. And localizing becomes an issue, because if you localize literally, it is borderline unreadable. It sounds very stilted, sometimes does not make sense, so there's an art to it that's not just a mechanical skill. And Ted Woolsey is very famous for playing with the script a little bit. He is famous for such localizations in, I think, Final Fantasy IV, I could be wrong, but Tella saying, "You spoony bard," that was him. He is responsible for Kefka's shouting, "Son of a submariner," Oh, I've never said this word out loud. Son of a submariner, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not submariner, is it?
No, it's Submariner.
Oh my god, how can I not speak on a... and yet I do this? God dang it. Anyways, yes, that's Ted Woolsey. One thing that he did that I am not a fan of is how Frog speaks in the SNES version. He speaks in this Old English, which... would be fine. Two things that were pointed out to me, and I now cannot unsee them. One, nobody else from Frog's Time talks like that. Everybody else speaks as Chrono and Marl and Lucas speak. Frog's the only one. Why? We don't know. Secondly, it's not correct Old English. Like, he will say, "Will thee accompany me, blah, blah, blah," whereas the correct form of that would be "whilst thou." There's just a lot of that is in there that was pointed out to me. I didn't discover this, but it was pointed out to me, and now I can't unsee it. They changed this in the port of the game for iOS, for Steam, for DS. Now everybody from Frog's Time talks the same. Frog still speaks very diligently, dignified. He speaks with an air of grace and elegance. He doesn't speak like Marl or Luca, which is nice. I'm not a fan of Old English Frog. I know he's beloved. What do you think, Ryan? You play the SNES.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on the fact that nobody else from his time talked that way, but maybe it's meant, it could be to distinguish him as a true knight. He is very much like that true of heart knight kind of trope. It could be, I mean, I've never had, magic spells cast on me, so it could be a byproduct of that, for all I know. Maybe it was during the fall. To give some spoilers away, maybe it was during the fall he bumped his head or something.
That's actually a good point. Did he speak that way before a certain life event in his life?
In the
SNES version?
I don't know. I can neither confirm nor deny that.
It's all Ozzy's fault, I see.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to move us along a little bit, if that's all right. So Chrono goes to the fair, and you bump into this girl with a pendant named Marl. We come to find her name is Marl. When you bump into her, you have a couple of choices. You could talk to her, you could pick up the pendant. I am a gamer, and a gentleman, I might add, and the first thing I did was pick up the pendant to make sure that she didn't lose it. Oh, if I only knew what troubles this would cause me. Anyway.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really like about this, but we'll tell that in due time. So you all have your romp around the fair. She eats some sweets. You can steal a lunch. There's a cat running around. You could pet the cat, which is nice. You could play some games. But eventually, you go to check out your friend Luca's new invention, a teleportation pod. It is a hell of a thing to be showing off at a county fair, because I grew up riding death traps and operations run by my high school friends' dads that didn't know the first thing about machinery making concerning sounds. So
that was my thing with this teleporter too. It was like, they're at the fair. Think about the things that you saw and possibly rode at the fair. Now, if you went to the fair next year and there was a teleporter, would you get it? Would you try it? Would you trust it at your county fair? I don't know where you live, Ryan. I see you nodding your head.
Dude.
But in small town Western Ohio county fairs, there is no fucking way I'm getting in a homemade teleporter. Not a chance.
So here's the thing. I don't know if it's necessarily like where I grew up as to when I grew up. I was in the Gravitron 10 times a day when these bad boys were going through. I was on the zipper being held together by duct tape. Like, dude, yeah, why not? I'd jump in it. Let's do it.
Yeah, this is the embodiment of YOLO, if you ask me. The true fearlessness at a county fair. You're never going to find somebody with more integrity and lack of a care of life.
Yeah, right.
In my notes, I have written here in quotes, "Oh, the horrors beyond my comprehension." I don't know what that means. Was I trying to be funny? Is this a line that somebody says? I don't think so. Anyway,
one thing about the fair that I think was cool, like upon thinking about it, I didn't notice this when I was playing it, but all of the time traveling eras throughout the game are represented at the fair. In the events that you can go do, you can go fight a giant robot. You can go do a drinking contest. There's a prehistoric dance that you can watch. I'm not sure if you can take part in it, but you can definitely watch.
You can dance at the dance. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really nice touch that you can dance too.
You can dance if you want to. You can leave your friend behind.
Hey, speaking of that, so you check out this teleporter, and Chrono steps up, and he gets teleported from the left side to the right. And Marl says, "OMG, this is great." So she runs up. She wants to try it too. But as she does, her pendant begins to glow. And that, turns out, is important because it sets off our inciting incident. Things go awry. The pendant glows. The machine malfunctions and rips open a portal. Marl disappears, leaving only the pendant behind. Luca's dad, Tabin, at this point, basically looks at the audience and says, "Well, wasn't that cool? Golly, now get out of here." It's like he's disappeared a child, and he's like, "All right, see you later."
Time for me to hit the old dusty trail.
That's exactly what would happen at the county fair, too.
Absolutely. The whole thing would pack up.
You go to grab Marl's pendant because Chrono's only characteristic is he's a good boy. And Luca and Tabin both say, "Good for you for going to look for her," which is very funny to me.
It reminds me of Dave, attaboy.
It's real nice of you to go try and find that girl that we lost somewhere in time or space. If you need me, I'll be upstairs asleep. Thanks.
I mean, that's pretty much what happens. You get transported back to this autumnal-looking landscape, that is the season autumn-looking landscape, and you're immediately attacked by imps. So this is where you learn how combat works. The first hook you get is when you make it out of the first area and back into the world map. It's the same one as you're familiar with, but the square where you live and the houses, they're all gone. Something you could have learned by talking to the townsfolk too, by the way, is that your town was at war with the fiends/mystics some 400 years ago. Different titles for those folks in the different ports. When you talk to the inn members now, after going through the portal, they say that this war is currently going on. So this is your first tell that you're time traveling.
So, Ryan, you played this game when it first came out. Did you know it was a time travel story? Because, of course, me and Rick coming to it now, of course, we know what it's about. But
well, I knew from my friend, as I mentioned, my friend was playing it, and I saw him playing through it, and I was like,
okay.
I remember seeing the late game, actually, and not really knowing what it was, and I'm like, because there's such a variation at that point about who's in your party and how they appear. And I remember asking him, like, who are all these people? Like, what kind of a JRPG party is that? Of course, like, all JRPGs, you end up with quite a ridiculous party by the end. But, yeah, he kind of explained the time travel mechanic and everything, and that perked my ears.
So you have to go through this forest to get to Guardia Castle, which you have to do every single time, by the way. Very annoying, because it's, like, not even a minute worth of walking. But anyways... The guards don't want to let you in, but the queen lets you in, and she's very familiar. And sure enough, when you visit her in the headquarters, it's Marl. She explicitly says, "Hey, it's me. Thanks for coming to get me." But suddenly the screen shifts to a sort of blue hue, and she says that she feels like she's being torn apart and dying, and then she vanishes. So this is the grandfather paradox, right? I mean, it's explicitly this is what this is. This also set up a tone that it never really cashed in on. I'm not upset about it because, like, the game's tone is good, but, like, I thought this was going to be much darker whenever I read this line.
So I don't know how it was in the version you played, but I loved the SNES visual description of this paradox. It basically, like, plays out the photograph from Back to the Future where it shows, like, if it actually shows sprites for her entire line, and like the imp takes the first one and then like the following ones disappear, and I was like, this is great, like this is really cool cutscene for the time, you know.
So you leave because you don't know what's going on, and you bump into Luca. Luca managed to come here somehow, and she reveals that yes, this is the grandfather's paradox. Marl is a descendant of Queen Lean, which is a weird name, but is a princess herself. So, historically, Queen Lean was kidnapped, but she was rescued. When Marl somehow came here, the folks at the castle saw her, presumed it was the queen, and just never questioned it whenever she started acting out of character, which is very funny. You, like, talk to the townsfolk or the people around the castle, and they mention that she's acting weird. I think one of them says, like, she wanted ice cream? What is ice cream? But since they assume that the real queen is here, they don't rescue the actual queen, which then means her descendants don't exist. I love this little reenactment that they give here when they're explaining all of this. They're using like the little sprites on the screen. It's very Final Fantasy VI, like when they're telling the story with like the little Moogles and stuff. It's very cute. But at this point, we've got to rescue our new friend Marl. When we proceed through the castle, we find the queen's hairpin that we had heard was missing. We find it around this group of nuns who are weirdly talking about how delicious we look. What could go wrong?
Yeah, they seem legit. Keep moving.
Yeah, it's natural, you know? It reminds me of that meme of, I don't know what show this is from or what movie, where the guy like waves to a nun and then he's like, wait, nuns don't work on Sundays. He turns around and shoots her. He falls. It's a very, funny stuff. Good things on that internet. But of course we have to fight these monster nuns. We do. And the last one is taken down by a newcomer, a frog, who is named Frog. He's obviously a skilled warrior. He comes with us after Luca makes several remarks about not liking frogs. It feels very gross. I felt very bad for him. She basically does everything but call him a slur.
Poor guy.
It is poor Frog.
Mm-hmm.
Tragic character.
Not to mention, he's been transformed into a frog, but now he's got people talking about how much they don't like frogs to his face.
When he saves them.
Yeah, right after he... Yeah.
We do find Queen Lean. She is in a room with the fake Chancellor, who is about to kill her. We bust in. She knows who Frog is, we find out, and she runs away. The Chancellor transforms into the boss Yakra, and you've got to fight him. This sets up a little, what would you call it? Not a theme, but this sets up a pattern in the game. A lot of bosses are going to counterattack you. Happens a lot.
Yeah. We didn't talk about this a whole lot in like the battle system, but a lot of the bosses have some kind of gimmick or trick to them or puzzle that you have to figure out. Like, there's some, but not many bosses where it's like, this is just a dude with some strong attacks and a bunch of HP. Like, there are definitely some, but a lot of the main bosses that you fight have a trick you have to figure out. And I kind of dig that.
Yeah, it's either like a trick to them or find the weakness kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of this is a little more strategic. It's not just mashing the X button or the A button, which is nice. What's funny to me is whenever you defeat this fake Chancellor, the Queen will come back and thank you. You can find the real Chancellor. You can find the real Chancellor stuffed in a treasure chest. He just kind of pops out of there. But the Queen and the King reunite. The Chancellor says that they must be more strict in their criminal justice system in the future to avoid this, which is very funny to me, thinking about fiends obeying the law or not. Frog, our new polite friend, he feels very disgraced for failing to prevent this kidnapping, and he dashes off. He says that this is his fault.
It's a lot of like common thing with Frog, just like really being super hard on himself whenever things are not perfect, whenever things don't end up perfectly.
A lot of self-doubt as well with Frog. Yeah.
As we'll learn why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm glad that they didn't hide that particular character development behind a side quest.
It is odd. The more that we talk about it, it is odd that like Frog's story is the story of the first half of the game, basically, and then everyone else's backstory is optional and extremely missable side quests.
There was a certain point where I remember thinking like, okay, so Frog's the main character. Like,
yeah, exactly.
We're Chrono, but this is Frog's story. That's not true, really,
no.
but it sure feels like that at the start of the game.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the game, a sex doll is the main character.
Oh, we'll get there, bud.
I can't wait.
So Marl reappears. She said she didn't know where she was. She couldn't feel or see anything, but she wonders if this is what it was like to die. Again, very interesting, but this never gets followed up on, which is a bummer. She apologizes for not telling you that she was the princess, and you're off again. You manage to find your way back to that portal that you came out of. This is where Luca conveniently reminds you that she is a good scientist, tinkerer, and she made a device that can make portals. A bit Deus Ex Machina, but ultimately not a big deal. So you do end up going back. The castle, exactly the same. The Chancellor, however, thinks that you kidnapped Marl, despite Marl actually saying, that you helped her. He calls you a filthy terrorist and takes you off to trial. Oh, I wrote down this line that the Chancellor says. He says, will your fate be to burn at the stake, perhaps? To hang upside down? Or feel the tickler, which is capitalized? What is this tickler, huh?
I'm imagining the tickler in my head, and I don't want any part of it, at least not right now.
This is like a Tim Robinson sketch.
Yeah, you're right. There's a definite like darkness to some of the things they're like alluding to in this like early section of the game. The tickler.
I mean, let's be honest though. Given those three options, I'm taking the tickler every time.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, without question. It sounds all right.
You got to take the tickler.
Yeah,
it's the tickler.
You never take the tickler, Jerry.
I took the tickler once. It was not a good time. This brings us to the trial, which is a very cool part of the game. You are basically being asked to answer for everything that you've done at the fair in the beginning. So remember when I said that I thought that I was being a gentleman and helping out Marl by picking up her pendant? Well, turns out that makes them think that you were trying to steal it from her. And they accuse you of that. If you tried to hurry Marl along when she was, like, eating candy, which I did because it takes a solid minute, then they count that against you. If you try to lie and say, no, I didn't do that, they somehow know, and they count it against you. You are basically playing a game of truth and lie to plead for your innocence.
Yeah, this was super interesting, like finding out that the game was keeping track of this stuff, because I didn't think that this game would be doing stuff like that, and it doesn't do it again, to the best of my memory. It's really just this trial, as far as I remember.
There are a few times this game does something fresh and then never revisits it, and this is honestly one of the coolest parts in the game, in my opinion. I stole the lunch. I did all sorts of things, and I love that they bring it back in some way. Like, there are repercussions for your actions, and especially for the time. Like, games didn't do this. Just didn't have this sort of thing.
Yeah. This is new stuff, and it happens again later in the game once you gain I don't think this is a spoiler, but once you gain the ability to travel through time, if you do nice stuff for people in the past, their generations will remember it down the line.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, it's very cool. It's not a lot. Like, it's just little things.
Right.
We're not like making some kind of a crazy thriller of a movie, but it's a really nice touch that they thought of this.
Like cheaper prices at a store if you help their ancestor. It's incredible stuff for the time.
Yeah, and I love it when games like show me that I had a choice at some point throughout the game and I didn't know that I had a choice. I love the feeling that like the game was accounting for a lot more things than I thought it was, you know. And this is a Super Nintendo JRPG is something where I expect it to just be, you know, I do what it tells me to do. And in that moment, I was like, yeah, go pick up the pendant. I don't want the cat to steal the pendant. That would be bad. So go pick it up. And yeah, let's rush her through eating the candy because we're at the fair. I got a teleporter to test out. Hurry up with the candy.
And I'm going to undercut the coolness of this a little bit because it doesn't matter. None of it matters.
Well, it doesn't really matter, but the fact that like I did have a choice when I didn't know that I had a choice is something that I do appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can get a different outcome, an innocent outcome where you're not taken off to be executed, but I think most people on their first play are going to get taken to the chopping block.
So I did get the innocent outcome.
Oh, really?
It doesn't matter though. Like the chancellor, when he delivers you to the jail, he actually says, "Oh yeah, this guy's sentenced to death." And there's a moment where I'm like, "Wait a minute, no, I was innocent." But like the guard knocks you out, the same as it ever was, and you're like, "You're gonna die in 3 days."
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's why I say like it's great to have this sort of, you know, callback, but ultimately the decision at the end doesn't play a role.
Nice. Okay. That's good. That's cool. It's a nice little soft world building of that crazy chancellor. So you are going to be in a jail cell, and you can either try to break out by annoying the guards to the point where they open the gate, or you could just wait for the guards to come and take you to the execution chamber and let Luca save you. Either way, though, you're going to get out of this predicament. And you're coming up to a boss battle of this sort of dragon tank. It's very funny to me that outside of the door, there is a classified document with a knocked out guard. And it basically, like, it'll tell you what it's strong against, the dragon tank, what it's weak against. And it basically says that it's invisible, quote, unless some lunatic with a sword comes along. It's a very, like, wink, wink to the camera kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, like they know that they're playing with tropes here. I just really like it. They know when to be funny in this game.
Yeah. And it's always funny when you have like over expository notes that are given to people who would not be trusted with that sort of information, or even better, just left on the floor. You know, this note details how to foil the plans to kill Chrono, and it's on the ground where it should be. And not stored where top secret things should be stored.
So you fight this dragon tank. When you beat it, the Chancellor and his men come out just in time for it to blow up, and it takes some of the bridge with it. It turns into a total Looney Tunes moment because they like get blasted into the air, their eyes like bug out, and they like start trying to run in midair, and then they grab onto each other and make a human bridge that you walk across. It's explicitly Looney Tunes. I like that they're not afraid to go there in this game.
Yeah, definite sense of humor, despite there being like the horrors of time travel paradoxes being introduced.
Keeps it light.
So Marl is able to call off the guards as you're fleeing the castle, but the king does come down shortly after, and they have a bit of a spat about living as royalty. Marl doesn't want to. She just wants to be a regular person, and she rejects her status and decides to run away with you. So you run through the woods, and surprise, there is a gate. They corner you, but you have an out here. So you sort of recklessly take it. You jump into this thing, and you're whisked away into the future to what we learn is 2300 AD. It's sort of a Fallout-esque postmodern future. It's clearly ravaged by war or some kind of fallout or something, to the point where there are domes scattered around and labs. It really does feel Fallout now that I am thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Especially because the labs are filled with mutants. And, there are folks that are in the domes that are still surviving, and they can't cross through these labs because of the mutants. They're starving. They're wearing rags. It's everybody is worse for wear.
So we've brought up a few times this game gets dark, and this was probably the one that filled me with the most dread. How when you get in the healing capsules in this time, it's it makes it a point to say, you don't feel nourished in any way. Your health is back, but it didn't do anything to sate your hunger, right? I forget how they word it, but it was these people can keep themselves alive, but never eat. Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, I'm with you. This particular part is I think of the time periods, the coolest and the one that's the most memorable to me, just because of that plight that they have there. It's very whenever you talk to them, you're like, whoa, it is fucked up in the future. No one's having a good time here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you are right, Ryan. That is very dystopian, thinking about you're able to keep yourself alive, but you're constantly starving.
Yeah.
What a horrible life to live.
And it gets worse with some of the discoveries you make.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, you learn a little bit about this place by talking to the people and the Elder Doan. There is little life left in the world. Food is incredibly scarce. There is food down below, with this supercomputer, but it's guarded by the robot guards. And this is a boss fight. It's not a crazy bad boss fight going down there. Still, that counterattack mechanic is very much in play, but overall, it's pretty easy. You go inside and you find out that the worst has happened. All the food has spoiled. And there's a dead man just in there. He has a note in his hand detailing how to proceed. He says that the rat in the scaffolding knows the secrets, so you have to catch it. He'll give you a code.
These are rats in the future. I mean, rats are pretty smart now. Just imagine how smart they're going to be in 3,000 years.
Just another, you're playing a video game moment.
It very much is that.
Yeah.
It very much is that. Which I guess, that's fine. This is a pretty depressing place, so.
Yeah. That little short story about that, not vault dweller, dome dweller that went down in search of food and found the storeroom where everything was rotten, and then he just fucking died down there, was just a very sad, cool little short story.
Yeah, 100%. You can get a lot of really good world building and story from this game if you take the time to talk to people and observe things. Mm-hmm. It's very nice. Very nice. And a good habit to get into if you're a fan of these sorts of games. When you get to the supercomputers downstairs, you are able to locate the nearest gate, which is to the east of the Protodome. No, it's at the Protodome.
Yes.
One of the two. I can't quite remember. Merle pulls a bit of what does this button do moment, and she cues up this video recording of a day where a being known as Lavos comes into the world and ended the world, essentially, in 1999. Kind of funny playing this today.
Always funny when you play a game where their like idea of the future is something that happened a long time ago now, and they're like 1999, well, not that far off. This game was 95, but still, like, in the future in 1999 a thing comes down from Earth, and it's always funny looking back on those dates, especially when it's presented as like a futuristic place.
Yeah.
It's also funny because it kind of parallels like Y2K.
Oh, true. Yeah.
It's pretty funny. Remember when people thought the world would end?
I remember.
That actually was a big problem back then. Fun fact. Like, that was a real issue. Like, people didn't think it was, but like...
Oh, people worked their ass off to make sure it wasn't a real issue. And they prevented Lavos from coming, and we're all here today doing a podcast.
Yeah, IRL. There was a real frog. This is a true story.
This is the timeline where Y2K occurred.
If you think Ozzy is wild in this timeline, you should have seen him in the other timeline. That's all I'm going to say. So everybody is shaken, obviously, that the world is going to end, but you decide, because this is a JRPG, that you're going to save it. This is your job now. So I think I forgot to mention this, but you find a seed down in the storage unit where the food was. This is a very, very, very on-the-nose metaphor. You give Doan the seed. It's an unfortunate present. And a very obvious metaphor. But Merle says, stay alive and don't give up hope, which, if I were starving, I would lose my shit. I would lose my mind if somebody told me that.
They're like, we have been starving down here for God knows how long, unable to eat, and you come up and you're like, here's your seed.
Yeah. And they're
enjoy waiting for that to grow.
They're basically like, what do we even do with this? And they're like,
there's no water here.
You plant it and give up hope. And they're probably like, are you fucking talking to me about hope?
The soil is irradiated.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Are you serious?
Oh, if I were more jaded, I would say, no, guys, just vote. It'll be fine. Just vote. But I'm not. So Doan is very pleased with you. He tells you that you're so special. You can just tell that you're very special. And he gives you his old jet bike key to get through Site 32 toward the Protodome, which is where we're going. Protodome. This part is wild, just absolutely wild to me. When we interact with the jet bike in Lab 32, we need the jet bike because it's a long distance, there are mutants, etc. We're ambushed by some robots, but the leader comes in and calms them all down. He is half motorcycle, half greaser, and 100% really cool. He's like, they call me bro, but you can call me Johnny. And he's like, you gotta race me, and I'll even let you use the jet bike, because that's the kind of guy I am. And don't you dare chicken out, babe. That's an actual quote. It's an actual quote. I love it so much. Do either one of you want to talk about the racing minigame a little?
I hate it.
What?
I hate it so much.
Wow.
Yeah, I hate it.
I don't know.
It's such a slingshotty nightmare to... I mean, it's not hard, but it's not fun. I really didn't like this.
It's so short that I didn't have enough room to grow to hate it. I had a good time with it. It was just like, cool, use your boost at the end, you win. Kind of bounce around with Johnny in the meantime. But I appreciated it because it's early in the game, and it's another thing like the trial where if you take it in context of when it originally came out, you're like, oh, this game's doing something new. Never goes back to this or does anything like it again, but it was a cool way to mix up gameplay.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. I lost 2 or 3 times before I beat it.
Yeah.
Wait, you guys lost to Johnny?
Oh yeah, I lost.
Oh yeah,
a couple times for sure. Each time I played it, because when I played on the iOS, I got 75% of the way through the game, and I lost a couple times both times I played it.
Wow. Maybe it was different in the newer version of it, but in the old version it was just like, oh, he's in front, you're in front. And then if you wait till like the last 50 meters or whatever, miles, whatever the measurement they're using is, and use your boost, you win.
It is exactly that. The thing that I struggled with personally was I never got a good handle on when the boost would activate, how far the boost would go, and how quick Johnny would catch up. Which is the first time I lost because first time. Second time, I used my boost a little too soon, and he beat me with like 0.2 seconds left.
Wow.
Yeah, frustrating.
Feels bad. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the trick. You get 3 boosts, but it doesn't really matter. You could use 2 of them, and you're still going to be tied. You have to use it right at the very end to get in front of him. At which point, what does he say? At which point he says, "You can challenge me again anytime. We'll ride like the wind, babe." And then you're done. You never see him
Extreme again. Little kid who's home for the summer with only one video game who's going to go back and race Johnny again and again, right?
It's so funny, dude. I love when Japanese games portray greasers because, like, I know that was a big thing in the 80s, like, because that's when the culture of America started to come over, and, you know, our greaser culture became a thing there. And I just love the ridiculous pompadours, which Johnny has, by the way, and, like, the jackets and the punk attitude. It's so funny.
One other thing about these, like, domes is this is the first time I noticed, and this continues throughout the game, like, you'll get a couple types of enemies on the screen, and then one enemy will attack the other enemies, which spurs on, like, a strong attack from them. And it kind of shakes up the way you have to approach some of the battles, and it gets harder as the game goes on. It's like really the only challenge you get from regular enemies is these things where it's like, I might want to hit the thing that's attacking me, but it's actually something else that's like spurring this on, and I need to go do that. And these domes is like the first time this gets introduced, I think, with those volcano-looking things that spew. I think they spew rocks at you.
For some reason, I don't remember those things at all.
Oh, interesting. They're in a few different areas.
Yeah, and then later on in the game, there become other enemies that get like enraged by another enemy hitting them or something like that.
Yeah, it definitely gives a strategy to the battles where like you focus on one because it will be the bigger threat as the battle goes on.
Yeah,
that's right. I do remember that. We go to the Protodome. We're there, and we find this defunct robot. Luca plans to fix him. Morrow is concerned that it might attack us, but Luca says robots don't attack on their own free will. They only attack because humans make them that way. Which is very sad if you know Luca's backstory.
Oh, yes.
But I thought this was going to be like a law of robotics thing.
Oh, yeah. Another thing that it gets brought up just for a second, and then well, we're about to get to what happens to Robo here in a second.
Well, the very first thing we hear is Robo's theme, which, again, actionably is never going to give you up. It just never gets old to me. Robo, I think his real name was R-669, if I'm not mistaken. He's a very, very polite guy.
Very beat me to it there, Ryan.
I don't get it. Can you explain the joke?
No.
Well, see, in order to explain the joke, we would have to go back a while. So walk back a little bit, give you some backstory.
Man, I love when Ryan plays the straight man and he just no-sells something immediately. I love it. It's so funny to me. So, dear listeners, one thing you might not know about me is that when I plan how things will go and when I schedule them, I'm often consistently about 20% behind. That being said, this episode, we don't want to cut this short. We don't want to skim through stuff. We want to give this game the love it deserves. We are going to pull an audible here and do a part 2. You are hearing this, if you're listening on the day or on the days after it comes out, around September 20th, 2022. You will hear part 2 of Chrono Trigger somewhere around October 20th. It might be a little earlier, maybe the 15th, 16th, 17th. It might be the 21st. Somewhere around there, it will come out. It also will not interfere with the already scheduled spooky month. So this will be in addition for everybody on the main feed, no strings attached, just as a way for me to say thank you for your patience, and as a special little treat for everybody. Because I like talking to Dave and Ryan. I'm excited to have them back.
I would be.
They're still here, by the way. They haven't spoke much.
Still here. I'm just excited for a bonus episode in the month of October.
Yeah. I was excited to be on one Pixel Project Radio episode. Now I get to be on 2. Holy shit, folks.
And I get an extra one where I could listen and be like, hey, one of those 3 people knows what he's talking about. No, I'm kidding. All three of these lovely gentlemen know what they're talking about.
So, with that being said, this is where we are going to cap part 1. Part 2 is going to be all story to the end. We'll cover the endings. We'll cover the side quests. We'll get into detail. We'll go more into detail about some of the battles because some of the more interesting battles are still yet to come. This is a great game. It really deserves the love, so we don't want to shortchange it. So stay tuned for that. Major thank you to Dave and Ryan of Tales from the Backlog and the List Off podcast, respectively, for their time, for their expertise, for their friendship, for their understanding, for everything. Speaking of them, this is about the time where we ask the guests to do some plugging, which is always intercepted and cut off by me doing the plugging for them at first. I have been a guest on both of these shows. These are 2 of my favorite shows. These are 2 of the shows that I listen to on time, all the time, unless there's an episode that I, with a game I haven't played, like The Outer Wilds. But I have been on both of these shows. They're both great. They're both quality. You both can fight to the death to who wants to say what first. But please, by all means, tell my listeners where they can hear you.
Ryan would kill me if we fought to the death. So, Ryan, go ahead, man. Take it away.
Wow. I don't know about that. I am not a pugilist nor a fighter. List Off podcast, we make lists about video games. My co-host Brian is currently on hiatus till around November or December, but he will be back. In the meantime, we are having a few guest episodes and doing some pre-recorded stuff as well, but you could tune in every week if you like hearing different video game related lists. We've had both of these lovely gentlemen on as guests and highly recommend those episodes. I just want to say thank you to Rick for having me on. Thanks, Dave, as well, for joining me and Rick here. And I love talking about Chrono Trigger. I'm sorry I did it for so long, but I'm really looking forward to part 2, man. Definitely looking forward to part 2. And just like Robo, I'm never going to give you up. Never going to let you down.
I'm wondering to myself how many times I'm going to play the music of Robo in this episode.
Just every music break is just Robo's theme. Promise the rest of the soundtrack is really good, but I mean, I just can't get over this. So it's going to have to be in here 7 times.
I guess I should mention where you guys could find us. It's anywhere you get your podcasts. That's where you could find us. List Off podcast with Brian and Ryan.
And my name is Dave again, and I'm the host of Tales from the Backlog, which is a show where, like Pixel Project Radio, every episode is one video game under the microscope. But in my show, we go no spoilers for a while. Usually the first half or 2/3 of the episode are a no spoiler deep dive breakdown of the game, so that you can listen even if you haven't played and hopefully not get spoiled too much. And then after that, spoiler wall is a free-for-all spoiler discussion. If you want a good place to start on Tales from the Backlog, Rick has been on my show 3 times. You can find the Disco Elysium, Yakuza Like a Dragon, and the upcoming 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim episodes, all featuring Rick. And Ryan has been on my episode twice, I believe, Elden Ring and Death's Door. So those are good places to start because I know you love the voices on this here episode.
It has been 3 times, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Also, I completely forgot about the Death's Door episode. That was one that I shelved because it's on the docket for 2023.
Yeah, and that one had Brian on it, too.
Yeah.
The rare treat.
The elusive Brian.
A guest appearance. Yeah. So you can find Tales from the Backlog, again, wherever podcasts are found. Listening to this closing of Pixel Project Radio, go in your search bar, type in Tales from the Backlog. Then when you're done, type in List Off and find them, too. And, you'll find us. We're everywhere. Hope you enjoy the show. And Rick, thank you for inviting me back on. I had a great time on that Tony Hawk episode. It's good to come back on and talk with you again, as always.
It's something just a little bit different.
Yeah, slightly.
Just a little bit different. A little different flavor of the 90s in this one. And as you all know, if you are return listeners, my name is Rick. This is Pixel Project Radio. If you're a new listener, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter by searching Pixel Project Radio. We come up all the same on both of those. We have got a Discord that you can join. You can find the link to that in both of the bios of those respective sites. We also have a Patreon. If you want to be like the kind folks who support independent artists like me and like Ben, you can do that by heading to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. Because the other two didn't mention it, I'm going to for them. They also have a Patreon and Coffee, respectively. Tales from the Backlog on Patreon, List Off on Coffee. I've never used Coffee. Well, I mean, I use it to support you, but I've never searched on Coffee. I know you could find the links to that in your episode descriptions, so that's there. And
Thanks,
always save the reviews for episodes with Ben. No hate to you guys, but I like to read those with Ben. We do have some new reviews coming up. Looking forward to getting the old ball and chain back in here.
Yeah, we miss you, Ben, for sure.
Yeah, I miss Ben. Ready to hear him again.
We all miss Ben.
The sweet, dulcet ASMR tones of one Benjamin Bugale.
I hope he listens to this. Sometimes he doesn't because he's like, I want to play the games. It's like, yeah, but we're shouting you out, buddy.
People are saying good things about you on the radio. Go listen.
Thanks again, fellas, for joining me. That's all for this episode. Until next time, my name is Rick Firestone. I'm signing off for the day. See you again soon.